Do you ever feel like your brain is just, I don't know, a browser with maybe 50 tabs open all at once? Just constantly feeling overwhelmed by emails, notifications, endless information scrolling past? Yeah, I think we all try to be, well informed, but the sheer volume of digital noise can just leave us feeling scattered,
Yep.
like unable to focus on what truly matters.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really powerful concept. It's called deep work. And we're going to explore how it can profoundly transform, well, not just your professional output, but maybe even your personal fulfillment too. We've pulled together insights from a whole bunch of fascinating sources, including a really foundational book by Newport. The idea is to give you a kind of shortcut, a way to master truly valuable work and maybe find more meaning in what you do. So what can you expect from this deep dive? Well, first, we'll define deep work. What is it exactly? And how is it different from its opposite, which is called shallow work? Then we'll explore why this almost ancient-sounding idea is becoming like an absolute superpower in our modern economy.
Seems critical now. And we'll tackle the paradox, right? If it's so valuable, why is it so incredibly rare? Why aren't more people doing it? We'll also look at the profound meaning, the satisfaction deep work can bring to your life. But most importantly, we're not just here for theory. We're going to give you concrete, really easy to implement rules and strategies, things you can use to cultivate this skill in your own life. Our mission here is practical application for you, starting, right now. Okay, so to kick us off then, we often hear about working hard, right? But what does it really mean to work deeply? How's that different from just, putting in the hours?
That's a really crucial distinction. Deep work, the formal definition is something like professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit.
Hmm.
So basically, activities where you're totally focused, no distractions, and you're really stretching your brain. And importantly, these efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate.
Okay, so it's the kind of work, challenging work that makes something new, something valuable.
Exactly. And it's the opposite of, well, shallow work.
Shallow work, right?
Yeah, and that's defined as non-cognitively demanding logistical-style tasks often performed while distracted. Think about answering routine emails, attending those status update meetings that could have been an email.
The busy work?
Precisely. These efforts tend to not create much new value in the world and are easy to replicate. Anyone could probably do them with minimal training. What's really fascinating, though, is looking back. You see how influential individuals throughout history, they consistently embrace deep work. It wasn't an accident.
Like who? Can you give some examples?
Sure, Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, he literally built a stone tower retreat, Bollingen Tower it's called, on Lake Zurich. He did this specifically to escape the hectic pace of his clinical practice in the city. He needed space for deeper, more careful thought because he wanted to, and I quote, change the way we understood the unconscious.
Wow. So he wasn't just taking a vacation, he was strategically creating space for his most important work.
Exactly. He actually reduced his clinical work time to make space for this deep thought. It was a professional strategy. And you see this pattern elsewhere. Michel de Montaigne, the essayist back in the 16th century, he had his private library in his chateau. Mark Twain wrote much of Tom Sawyer in an isolated shed. His family had to blow a horn to call him for meals.
No Slack notifications back then.
Definitely not. Or think more recently, Woody Allen. Incredibly productive filmmaker, right? 44 films, 23 Academy Award nominations over his main period. He famously never owned a computer, wrote everything on a manual typewriter, totally free from electronic distraction.
That's amazing. So this dedication to focused, isolated work. Peter Higgs, the physicist too,
Sure.
right? He worked in a very disconnected way.
Yes, exactly. This ubiquity of deep work among influential individuals, as our source calls it. It's a clear theme. But it really stands in sharp contrast to the behavior of most modern knowledge workers.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, and probably for our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this seemingly old-fashioned idea, this deep work thing, why is it so incredibly relevant for you listening right now in today's, super fast-paced digital world? It almost feels counterintuitive.
It feels counterintuitive, but it's absolutely crucial. And the reason is because we're living through what MIT economists Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee call a great restructuring of labor markets.
A great restructuring. Okay, what does that mean?
It means digital technology is automating many, let's say, lower skilled or routine jobs. At the same time, advanced communication, remote work capabilities, they allow companies to easily outsource tasks to global stars, the best people anywhere in the world. This leaves fewer secure, well-paying positions for, let's say, average local talent in many fields.
Okay, so the landscape is shifting dramatically.
Yeah.
Who thrives in this new economy then?
According to Brynjolfsson and McAfee, and supported by our sources, there are really three groups set to thrive. First, you have the high-skilled workers. These are the people who can work with and tease variable results out of increasingly complex machines. They know how to leverage technology at a high level.
Can you give an example?
Think of someone like Nate Silver and his election forecasting. His success isn't just about Googling stuff. It's his ability to feed massive amounts of data into complex databases, run sophisticated statistical models like his mysterious Monte Carlo simulations. He has to master complex tools, things like SQL commands, specialized software like Stata, stuff that takes real effort to learn. So to be in this group, you need to be able to master such complex tools.
Got it. So deep learning is required there. What's the second group?
The second group is the superstars. These are the absolute best of the best in their fields. Because of digital networks, they're accessible globally. This creates a kind of winner-take-all market.
So not just movie stars or athletes.
No, it extends way beyond that. Think about David Heinemeier Hansson, the creator of the programming framework Ruby on Rails. He works from Chicago, Malibu, Marbella. Companies pay him top dollar for just enough of his time to complete specific projects because he delivers outstanding results. They get better results for less money than hiring someone less skilled full-time. This applies to top consultants, marketers, writers, designers. Anyone whose elite skill can be delivered remotely. The superstar effect is real in knowledge work.
Okay, high-skilled workers, superstars. What's the third group?
The third group is the owners. These are the people with the capital to invest in all these new technologies and platforms. Think of venture capitalists like John Doerr, who funded giants like Twitter, Google, Amazon. Having access to capital obviously provides massive advantages in this restructured economy.
Right, so for most listeners, paths 1 and 2, becoming high-skilled or a superstar, seem more achievable than suddenly becoming a major investor. And you're saying deep work is key for both of those.
Absolutely. It's the common thread. Deep work is crucial for those first two paths for two main reasons.
Okay, what are they?
First, deep work helps you quickly learn hard things. Remember Nate Silver mastering complex software? That requires deep learning. There's this great quote from Antonin Delmes Circelanges, a philosopher, who said you must let your mind become a lens, focusing intense attention. This lines up perfectly with K. Anders Ericsson's research on deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice, right. That's about focused effort, getting feedback.
Exactly. It requires intense focus on a specific skill you're trying to improve, and you need feedback. But crucially, Ericsson and others emphasize that deliberate practice cannot exist alongside distraction. You simply can't learn hard things effectively if you're constantly switching contexts.
And there's a biological reason for this, isn't there? Something about myelin.
Yes. Daniel Coyle talks about this in the Talent Code. When you focus intensely on learning a skill, you trigger specific neural circuits to fire repeatedly in isolation. This process stimulates the growth of myelin, which is a fatty tissue that wraps around neurons. Myelinated neurons fire faster and cleaner. It's like insulating an electrical wire. So to build the complex neural circuits required for hard skills, like coding in SQL or mastering a musical instrument, you must focus intensely without distraction. Distracted learning fires too many circuits haphazardly. It doesn't build that clean, efficient myelin sheath effectively.
Fascinating. So deep work literally rewires your brain for high-level skills. What's the second reason it's crucial?
The second reason is that deep work helps you produce at an elite level. It's not just about learning, it's about output, quality and quantity.
How so?
Look at Adam Grant, youngest tenured professor at Wharton, super productive, published 7 major articles in top journals in 1 year, wrote the bestseller Give and Take. How did he do it? His secret wasn't necessarily working insane hours. It was maximizing the intensity of focus during the hours he did work. Our sources boil it down to a simple formula. High-quality work produced, time spent, X, intensity of focus.
Ah, so it's a multiplier effect. More focus means more output per hour.
Precisely. Double your focus intensity, and you can potentially double your high-quality output without spending any more time. And this relates to another concept, attention residue, studied by Sophie Leroy. When you switch from one task to another, especially quickly, your attention doesn't follow immediately. A residue of your attention remains stuck on the previous task.
Right, like when you quickly check email and then try to get back to writing, your mind is still kind of processing the email.
Exactly. That residue reduces your cognitive capacity for the new task. Multitasking, constant checking, interruptions, they all create attention residue, significantly lowering the quality and speed of your work. Deep work, by its nature long, uninterrupted focus, minimizes this residue, allowing you to perform at your peak potential.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But what about those people like CEOs or high-level managers? Jack Dorsey, you mentioned him. His schedule seems like the opposite of deep work, constant meetings, fractured time.
That's a fair point, and the sources acknowledge it. Some roles, particularly high-level leadership, derive value differently. Dorsey's value might be more as hard-to-automate decision engine, constantly processing information and making rapid judgments based on broad inputs.
So reacting quickly is part of the job description there.
In some cases, yes. So deep work isn't the only skill that's valuable in the new economy. But, and this is key, the niches where that kind of fractured reactive schedule is truly optimal are increasingly rare. For most knowledge workers, for you listening, unless your core job function is that rapid decision-making based on constant input, you are almost certainly best served by giving serious consideration to depth. Cultivating the ability to work deeply is likely your best bet for thriving.
Okay, so if deep work is this valuable, this almost essential skill for thriving, why aren't more people doing it? It feels like everyone talks about focus, but the reality is different. Why is this superpower so rare?
Yeah, it's a real paradox. The simple answer, blame the tools, specifically network tools and their ubiquitous access.
You mean email, Slack, social media, news sites?
All of it. Email, SMS, Slack, Teams, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, news feeds, infotainment sites. They are constantly available, constantly pinging us on our smartphones, on our office computers. There was a McKinsey study back in 2012, and things have likely only gotten worse, that found the average knowledge worker spent over 60% of their work week just on electronic communication and internet searching. Nearly 30% was on email alone.
60%? That's huge. It leaves barely any time for actual focused work.
Exactly. This constant digital tether fragments our attention into tiny slivers. It makes sustained focus almost impossible. Nicholas Carr argued powerfully in his book, The Shallows, that this isn't just a temporary inconvenience. He said, essentially, spend enough time in a state of frenetic shallowness and you permanently reduce your capacity to perform deep work.
Wow, permanently reduce your capacity. That's scary.
It is. Carr himself found he had to move to a cabin, physically disconnect, just to regain the focus needed to write that very book. It suggests our brains actually get rewired by constant distraction. And it's not just the tools themselves. Modern business trends actively seem to undermine depth.
Like what kind of trends?
Well, think about open office plans. Facebook famously built a 10-acre open plan office. Square designed common spaces specifically to encourage serendipity. The idea is collaboration, but the reality, as Cal Newport puts it, is often an absurd attack on concentration.
Yeah, I can imagine. Hard to focus when you hear every conversation around you.
Research by Gloria Mark backs this up. Even very short interruptions can significantly delay task completion and increase errors because it takes time to refocus. Then there's instant messaging. IBM was seeing like 2.5 million internal IMs daily years ago. Employees considered efficient often have alerts flashing, constantly jumping between coding and chat windows. IMs are always active, magnifying the impact of interruption.
Constant context switching again.
And the pressure for a social media presence. Even serious organizations like the New York Times started encouraging journalists to tweet regularly, to interrupt their deep reporting for shallow content. Jonathan Franzen was famously ridiculed for not being on Twitter. George Packer, who wrote the award-winning book The Unwinding, completely offline, admitted, "Twitter is crack for media addicts. It scares me."
So that's the paradox, isn't it? These things, open offices, IM, social media, they're often presented with benefits like serendipity, faster responses, more exposure.
Right, those benefits exist, arguably. But the argument from the deep work perspective is that those benefits are often dwarfed by the benefits that flow from a commitment to deep work. So why? Why is distraction still so widely embraced if deep work is so much more valuable?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
There are a few, maybe somewhat arbitrary, but powerful reasons driving this. First is what Newport calls the metric black hole.
Metric black hole, meaning
It's incredibly hard to measure the negative impact of shallow work or the positive impact of deep work on the bottom line. Productivity in knowledge work is notoriously difficult to quantify. There's a great example. Tom Cochran, when he was CTO at Atlantic Media, actually did the hard work of quantifying his own email usage, 160 emails a day, taking 1.5 hours. Then he extrapolated company-wide. He calculated that just processing email was costing the company over $1 million a year in labor costs. His conclusion: this free and frictionless method of communication had soft costs equivalent to procuring a small company Learjet.
Wow, a corporate jet's worth of time spent on email.
Yeah, but doing that kind of complex analysis is rare. Because the impact isn't easily visible, the cost of shallowness remains hidden. No clear metrics, no pressure to change.
Okay, so it's hard to measure the problem. What else?
Second, there's the principle of least resistance. This principle suggests that in a business setting, without clear feedback on the impact of various behaviors to the bottom line, we will tend toward behaviors that are easiest in the moment.
So being constantly connected feels easier than carving out focused time.
Exactly. Responding instantly to emails, jumping on every IM, it feels productive, it feels easy right now, even if it's less effective overall. There was a Harvard Business School study by Leslie Perlow looking at consultants. These professionals felt intense pressure, spending 20-25 hours a week outside the office on email, believing they had to answer everything within an hour. But Perlow ran an experiment where teams were forced to have one designated evening completely off per week, no email, no work calls. What happened? They actually found they enjoyed work more, communicated better within the team, and client relations didn't suffer at all. But the default, the path of least resistance, was constant connectivity.
Same with things like endless meetings, maybe. They feel like you're doing something.
Yes. Standing meetings, routine check-ins. They are an easy form of personal organization, a simulacrum of progress. They look like work, but they often fracture schedules to the point where sustained focus during the day becomes impossible. Yet they persist because they're easy to schedule and feel like activity.
Okay, metric black hole, principle of least resistance. What else?
Third, there's ambiguity and the obsession with busyness as a proxy for productivity. In many knowledge work roles, it's genuinely not clear what being productive even looks like. What's the tangible output? Without clear metrics for valuable output, people default to performing busyness, constantly sending emails, being visible on Slack, attending meetings. These look like work.
Right. If you can't point to the thing you built, you point to how busy you were.
Precisely. Contrast this with someone like Richard Feynman, the Nobel-winning physicist. He was apparently actively irresponsible about administrative duties. He'd say no to committees, ignore memos. Why? Because he had absolute clarity that his real job was doing real good physics work, and that required absolute solid lengths of time.
His clarity about what mattered gave him clarity about what didn't.
Exactly. But for many knowledge workers who lack that clarity, visible busyness becomes the goal. Marissa Mayer, when she was CEO of Yahoo and banned remote work, partly justified it by tracking badge swipes and VPN logins, punishing people for not being visibly logged in enough. The signal was, if you're not visibly busy, I'll assume you're not productive.
That definitely prioritizes presence over actual output.
And finally, there's a kind of cultural factor. Neil Postman called it technopoly, a culture that surrenders to the belief that technology is the highest good. In a technopoly, anything associated with the newest technology, especially the internet, is seen as inherently innovative and necessary, almost without question.
So being on Twitter is seen as more innovative than, say, locking yourself away to write a book.
In some circles, absolutely. Remember the NYT reporter urged to tweet? Or think about how even like a refrigerated logistics company puts, like us, on Facebook, on its trucks. It's assumed to be essential. Deep work, meanwhile, builds on more old-fashioned values, things like quality, craftsmanship, and mastery. These often get exiled in favor of more distracting high-tech behaviors, partly because that metric black hole prevents such clarity about what truly creates value.
So it seems like a perfect storm of factors working against deep work becoming mainstream.
It really is. But there's a silver lining here for the individual, for you listening.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
The myopia of your peers and employers, as Newport puts it, uncovers a great personal advantage, because deep work is becoming rarer precisely when it's becoming increasingly valuable due to that great restructuring.
If you can cultivate this skill while everyone else is distracted.
You gain a massive competitive edge. The rarity increases its value proposition for you.
Okay, so we've established the economic value, the competitive advantage, but you mentioned earlier it goes deeper than that. Our sources suggest deep work offers something more profound, a path to meaning, maybe even a good life.
That's absolutely right. This isn't just about productivity hacks or getting ahead. There's a strong argument that deep work connects directly to human fulfillment and satisfaction. We can look at this through a few different lenses: neurological, psychological, and philosophical.
Okay, let's start with the brain. What's the neurological argument for deep work being meaningful?
This comes beautifully from the experience of science writer Winifred Gallagher. She received a dire cancer diagnosis facing a really tough prognosis. But she made a conscious decision about where to focus her attention. She chose to focus on things like movies, walks, and a 6:30 martini. And despite her grim circumstances, she found her life during treatment was often quite pleasant.
Wow. By choosing what to focus on.
Exactly. Her insight was profound. Who you are, what you think, feel, and do, what you love, is the sum of what you focus on.
Yeah.
Our subjective experience of life isn't just based on external circumstances, it's largely determined by what we pay attention to. Deep work, that state of intense concentration, essentially hijacks your attention apparatus. It fills your awareness so completely that it prevents you from noticing the many smaller and less pleasant things that unavoidably and persistently populate our lives. You know, the minor annoyances, the anxieties, the trivial distractions like the endless stream of unimportant email subject lines the author mentions.
So being deeply engrossed in challenging work actually crowds out the negative noise.
That's the idea. The implication is clear. Spending more time working in a state of depth maximizes the meaning and satisfaction you'll associate with your working life, because your brain literally constructs your world based on where your attention lies. Choose depth, and you shape a more meaningful experience.
Okay, that's compelling from a neurological standpoint. What about the psychological argument?
This connects directly to the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist famous for the concept of flow.
Ah, yes, being in the zone.
Exactly. Csikszentmihalyi used something called the experience sampling method, basically pinging people randomly throughout the day to record what they were doing and how they felt. He found consistently that people report their best moments, their optimal experiences, what he termed flow, when your body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile.
That sounds a lot like the definition of deep work.
It absolutely is. Deep work is almost perfectly an activity well suited to generate a flow state. It stretches your mind, demands concentration, you lose yourself in the activity. And importantly, Csikszentmihalyi's research showed that flow generates happiness. People are generally happier when they are in flow, even if the activity is demanding, than when they are passively relaxing.
So the implication is, build your work life around deep work, and you're essentially building it around a scientifically proven source of happiness and satisfaction.
Precisely. It's a proven path to deep satisfaction.
Okay, neurology, psychology. What's a philosophical angle on meaning?
This comes from thinkers like Hubert Dreyfus and Sean Dorrance Kelly, who wrote a book called All Things Shining. They explore how meaning can be found in the modern world. They argue that the act of craftsmanship, honing a skill and applying it with dedication, provides a key to reopening a sense of sacredness in an often disenchanted world, a world where shining things now seem far away.
Craftsmanship, like woodworking or pottery.
It can be, but it's broader than that. They give the example of Rick Furr, a modern blacksmith who painstakingly recreates ancient metalworking techniques. This clearly requires most of his day in a state of depth, intense focus and skill, and it clearly brings him great meaning. He even says, "I don't need a sword, but I have to make them." It's a calling rooted in the craft itself.
But can this apply to knowledge work, like coding or writing or strategy?
Absolutely. Dreyfus and Kelly emphasize there's nothing intrinsic about the manual trades in generating this meaning. They argue that any pursuit, be it physical or cognitive, that supports high levels of skill can also generate a sense of sacredness. There's a quote often cited from the book, The Pragmatic Programmer, riffing on a medieval stonemason's perspective. "We who cut mere stones must always be envisioning cathedrals." It suggests programmers, for example, can and should view their work as a craft, demanding skill, dedication, and contributing to something larger.
So it's not about what job you have, but how you approach it. Less follow your passion and more bring passion and craftsmanship to your work.
Exactly. It's not about finding some rarefied job, but cultivating a rarefied approach to your work. The specifics of the work are irrelevant compared to the dedication to skill and quality. And deep work is the key to this craftsmanship in knowledge work. It's the state required to hone complex cognitive skills and apply them at an elite level to produce work of real quality and value. So embracing deep work in your own career isn't just about productivity, it's an effort that can transform a knowledge work job from a distracted, draining obligation into something satisfying, something infused with the meaning that comes from craftsmanship.
Wow. Okay, so whether you look at it through the brain, the mind, or philosophy, deep work seems deeply connected to living a meaningful, satisfying life.
That's the core message. Our source even playfully suggests the term Homo sapiens depensus, implying that we as humans are perhaps inherently wired to flourish in depth. A deep life, it seems, is truly a good life.
Okay, this all sounds fantastic. Valuable, meaningful, maybe even essential for thriving. But how? How do you actually do it in the real world with all its demands and distractions? This is where our deep dive gets really practical. Let's get into the specific rules, the strategies that will help you integrate deep work into your life.
Right. We need to move from the why to the how. Our source mentions this architectural concept called the eudaimonia machine, a hypothetical building designed purely to facilitate deep human flourishing through different zones of increasing concentration.
Sounds cool, but probably not something most of us have access to.
Exactly. Most of us don't have a custom-built deep work fortress, but the goal is to create your own personal eudaimonia machine, your own environment, your own habits and rituals that support deep work. Think of yourself maybe as a disciple of depth in a shallow world. You're going against the grain. And these strategies, these rules, are designed to significantly increase your success in making deep work a core part of how you operate. So the first overarching rule is simply work deeply, but how you implement that needs structure. The crucial first step under this rule is to decide on your depth philosophy.
Philosophy, like how I approach it conceptually.
Exactly, because no single method fits everyone's life or job. You need a philosophy, a structured approach that fits your specific circumstances. Our sources outline 4 main ones.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's the monastic philosophy. This is the most extreme. It involves basically eliminating or radically minimizing shallow obligations altogether. Think like a monk in a monastery, but for work.
Who does that?
Well, think of Donald Knuth, the legendary computer scientist. He famously hasn't used email since 1990.
No email. How does he communicate?
Postal mail. His assistant filters it, and he deals with batches every 3 months or so. His reasoning. Email is a wonderful thing for people whose role in life is to be on top of things. But not for me. My role is to be on the bottom of things. Deep, foundational work. Or Neil Stephenson, the sci-fi author. No public email or mailing address. He argues the productivity equation is nonlinear, getting long, uninterrupted chunks of time is essential for writing novels.
Okay, so monastic is pretty hardcore, probably not feasible for most jobs.
Probably not. But if your main contribution is, say, discrete, clear, and individualized, like writing novels or proving theorems, it's something to consider.
Got it. What's the next philosophy?
Second is the bimodal philosophy. This is where you clearly divide your time between deep work and everything else. You might dedicate specific, clearly defined stretches, say certain days of the week, or even weeks or months purely to deep pursuits with 0 interruptions allowed. Then, during the other periods, you're fully available, open, connected, dealing with the shallow stuff.
Ah, like having dedicated deep work weeks.
Exactly. Carl Jung is a classic example again. He had his intense deep work retreats at Bullingen Tower, but he also maintained a busy clinical practice and social life back in Zurich. It was bimodal distinct modes. Adam Grant, who we mentioned earlier, uses this too. He apparently stacks all his teaching into one semester, leaving the other semester free for deep research work. During those research semesters, he might take short 2 to 4 day monastic periods within them, using an out-of-office autoresponder saying he's unavailable. But outside those deep blocks, he's known for being very accessible.
That seems potentially more adaptable for many people.
It is. It's compatible with more jobs than you might think. People tend to respect well-defined and well-advertised periods of unavailability if they know you'll be reachable at other times.
Okay, monastic bimodal. What's number 3?
The third approach is the rhythmic philosophy. This is probably the most common and practical for many. It focuses on building a regular habit of deep work, making it a consistent rhythm in your daily or weekly schedule.
So less about long retreats, more about consistent sessions.
Yes. The idea is to remove the willpower needed to decide when to do deep work. It just becomes part of your routine. The classic example here is Jerry Seinfeld's don't break the chain method for writing jokes. He gets a big wall calendar, and for every day he does his writing task, he puts a big red X over that day. After a few days, you'll have a chain, he says. Just keep at it, and the chain will grow longer every day. Your only job next is to not break the chain.
I like that. Visual progress, building momentum.
It's very effective. Brian Chappell, a doctoral candidate mentioned in the source, had a demanding job, a new child, and was writing his dissertation. He adopted a rhythmic approach, scheduling 90 minutes of deep work early every morning before his workday officially began. He found it liberating because the decision was already made. 5:30 a.m. was deep work time, period.
This seems ideal for someone with a standard office job, right? Where disappearing for days isn't really an option.
Definitely. Consistent daily or weekly blocks, maybe first thing in the morning, maybe a couple of afternoons a week.
Mm.
The key is the regular rhythm.
Okay, and the last one.
The fourth is the journalistic philosophy. This is about fitting deep work into your schedule wherever you can find an opening, like a journalist on a deadline grabbing moments to write between interviews.
So opportunistic deep work.
Kind of, yeah. It requires the ability to switch into deep work mode quickly, often with little notice. Walter Isaacson is cited as an example. While rapidly rising as a journalist and editor, he wrote a massive 864-page biography, The Wise Men, largely by retreating to a bedroom for short bursts, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, whenever he could find time during a summer beach rental with family around. Cal Newport himself says he used this approach while writing the Deep Work book, taking advantage of unexpected free time like kids' naps or canceled meetings to disappear to a library and write intensely for an hour or two.
That sounds difficult. Like you need to be really skilled at switching focus.
It is difficult. It's probably the hardest to sustain, but it's also very robust if you are confident in the value of your deep work and you're practiced at dropping into that state quickly. It allows you to maximize even small, unexpected blocks of time that would otherwise be wasted.
Okay, so monastic, bimodal, rhythmic, journalistic. First step is to pick one that fits your life.
Yes, choose your philosophy. But then, within that philosophy, the next crucial step is to ritualize your deep work sessions.
Ritualize, you mean like have a specific routine?
Exactly. Don't just wait for inspiration or hope you'll feel like focusing. As Mason Curry, who studied the routines of famous creatives, summarized, waiting for inspiration to strike is a terrible, terrible plan.
Yeah, inspiration rarely rings the doorbell.
Right. Look at highly productive people. Robert Caro, the Pulitzer-winning biographer of Lyndon Johnson, apparently has his New York office where every inch is governed by rules. He says, I trained myself to be organized. Charles Darwin had a strict daily routine, specific walks, blocks for study, time for letters, another walk specifically to mull over challenging ideas. They were rarely haphazard.
So what makes an effective ritual for deep work? What should you include?
Our source suggests several key components to define for your ritual. First, where and how long. Specify your location, your usual office with the door closed, a conference room, the library, and set a specific time frame. Aim for a discrete challenge, not an open-ended slog. Second, how you'll start deep work. How will you transition? Maybe it's getting a specific type of coffee, clearing your desk, spending 2 minutes sitting silently, reviewing keynotes, a clear starting gun. Third, how you'll work. Set rules for yourself during the session. When can you take breaks? Can you check email? What about snacks or drinks? Have a plan for handling energy dips, maybe a short walk, more coffee, a healthy snack readily available. And fourth, how you'll support your work. What systems do you need? Easy access to necessary information, specific notebooks, whiteboards, software tools ready to go. Minimize friction once you start.
Okay, so it's about creating structure around the session itself, removing decisions so you can just focus on the work.
Precisely. It requires some experimentation to find what feels right for you. But having a ritual provides the structure and commitment your mind needs to release itself into deep focus.
Sometimes, though, just having a ritual isn't enough to get started, especially on a big project. The next idea is about making grand gestures. What does that mean?
It means deliberately investing significant effort, time, or even money into your deep work project to increase its perceived importance and your commitment to it. It's a psychological trick, almost.
Like raising the stakes for yourself.
Exactly. J.K. Rowling is a famous example. She was really struggling to finish Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows at home with distractions. So what did she do? She checked into a suite at the 5-star Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh. Cost her something like $1,000 a day back then. She said, the first day's writing went well, so I kept coming back. Ended up finishing the last of the Harry Potter books here.
Wow. So the sheer cost of the hotel room made her focus.
It signaled the importance of the task to her own brain. The investment made it easier to focus, harder to procrastinate. Bill Gates is famous for his Think Weeks, where he retreats alone to a cabin with papers and books for a week of uninterrupted deep thinking. That's a grand gesture of time and isolation. William Shockley, the physicist, after getting scooped on the invention of the transistor, reportedly locked himself in a Chicago hotel room until he figured out a better design, which earned him a share of the Nobel Prize.
So it doesn't have to be expensive, necessarily. It could be a big commitment of time or effort.
Right, it could be booking a secluded cabin, taking an unpaid week off work, even something like building a dedicated writing shed in your backyard. The point is, a grand gesture musters the energy to begin and sustain this work by signaling its profound importance to yourself.
Okay, this next point seems a bit contradictory at first. Don't work alone. But deep work sounds so solitary. Jung's tower, Twain's shed. How does collaboration fit in?
Yeah, it seems like a conflict, especially with the criticism of open offices we discussed. But there's nuance here. The idea isn't constant collaboration, but strategic interaction. First, acknowledge the serendipitous creativity theory. There's value in bumping into people with different ideas. MIT's famous Building 20, a temporary WWII structure, housed a random mix of departments: nuclear science, linguistics, electronics. These chance encounters are credited with sparking major innovations. Bell Labs' Murray Hill campus was deliberately designed by director Mervyn Kelly with long hallways to force physicists, theorists, and experimentalists to interact. He believed these random collisions were essential for breakthroughs like, again, the transistor. It was almost impossible to walk the halls without encountering new ideas or problems.
Okay, so random encounters can be good, but how do you balance that with the need for concentration?
That's where the nuance comes in. A hub-and-spoke architecture of innovation. Even at MIT's newer Stata Center, designed for serendipity, professors insisted on having private, soundproofed offices, the spokes branching off the collaborative hubs. The principle for you is, expose yourself to ideas and hubs on a regular basis, but maintain a spoke in which to work deeply on what you encounter. Go out for coffee, attend conferences, chat in the hallways, the hubs, but then retreat to your quiet space, the spoke, to process and develop those ideas deeply.
Hub and spoke, I like that model. Are there other ways collaboration fits?
Yes, there's also collaborative deep work, sometimes called the whiteboard effect.
Like working intensely with someone else.
Exactly. The development of the transistor wasn't just solo work by Shockley, Bardeen, and Breton. It involved periods of intense, focused back and forth, particularly between Bardeen, the theorist, and Bratton, the experimentalist, working together at a deep level. For certain types of problems, brainstorming, debugging complex code, developing strategy, working with someone else at the proverbial shared whiteboard can push you deeper than if you were working alone. You bounce ideas, challenge assumptions, build on each other's insights in real time.
So the key is using collaboration strategically, not letting it become constant interruption. Leverage it to push results, but protect your focus time.
Precisely. Don't let collaboration crowd out the unbroken concentration ultimately required, but use it selectively to enhance your deep work efforts.
All right, we've talked about philosophies, rituals, grand gestures, collaboration. Now let's talk about actually getting it done consistently. This next point is about execution. Execute like a business, using something called the 4 disciplines of execution, or 40X.
Yes, this framework comes from the business world, from a book by Chris McChesney, Sean Covey, and Jim Hurling. It's designed to help organizations execute on their most important goals amidst the whirlwind of daily urgencies. And the principles apply perfectly to executing on your personal deep work goals.
Okay, so what are these 4 disciplines?
Discipline, #1 is focus on the wildly important. The core idea here is focus. The 40X authors say the more you try to do, the less you actually accomplish. You have to resist the urge to pursue too many goals at once. For you applying this to deep work, it means identifying a small number, maybe just 1 or 2 truly ambitious, wildly important outcomes that your deep work hours will be dedicated to achieving.
So not just do more deep work, but use deep work to achieve X.
Exactly. A specific goal that offers tangible and substantial professional benefits. This focus will generate a steadier stream of enthusiasm. David Brooks is quoted saying, "Say yes to the subject that arouses a terrifying longing. Find that one big thing." Cal Newport's example for himself as an academic was a goal like, publish 5 high-quality peer-reviewed papers this academic year. Wildly important for his career.
Okay, focus on the wildly important. What's discipline 2?
Discipline #2 is act on the lead measures. This is about measurement, but measuring the right things. Most people focus on lag measures, the outcomes you want, like number of papers published, revenue generated, customer satisfaction.
Bring the results.
The problem with lag measures is they come too late to change your behavior. By the time you see the result, the actions that caused it are in the past. Lead measures, on the other hand, measure the new behaviors that will drive success on the lag measures. They predict future success, and crucially, you can influence them directly right now.
Okay, give me an example.
If your lag measure is weight loss, a lead measure would be calories consumed or hours exercised this week. If your wildly important goal is publishing 5 papers, what's the behavior you control that drives that outcome?
Spending time actually researching and writing.
Exactly. The relevant lead measure for deep work goals is almost always time spent in a state of deep work dedicated toward your wildly important goal. Newport shares how he shifted from tracking papers submitted, lag measure, to tracking hours spent in deep work each week, lead measure. This simple shift completely changed his daily behavior because he could directly control and track the hours.
Focus on the input, deep work hours that leads to the output. Goal achieved. Makes sense. Discipline 3.
Discipline #3 is keep a compelling scoreboard. The 40X guys emphasize people play differently when they're keeping score. You need a visible way to track your progress on your lead measures.
So not just track it, but make it visible, compelling.
Yes. It shouldn't be hidden away in a spreadsheet. They suggest a physical artifact, something you see regularly. For your deep work lead measure, hours spent, this could be as simple as a piece of cardstock tacked to your wall where you make a tally mark for every hour of deep work completed toward your goal. Newport describes doing exactly this tally marks for hours. He even added a circle around a tally mark whenever he completed a significant milestone, like drafting a section of a paper that resulted from those hours. This visually connected the effort, lead measure, to the tangible results contributing to the lag measure.
That sounds motivating, seeing the progress build up.
It is. He credits this scoreboard system with helping him publish 9 papers in 1 year, effectively doubling his previous rate. The visibility keeps the goal top of mind and fuels motivation.
Okay, wildly important goal, lead measures, compelling scoreboard. Is there a discipline 4?
Yes. Discipline #4 is create a cadence of accountability. This is about establishing a regular rhythm where you review your scoreboard, reflect on what worked or didn't, and recommit to achieving your goal in the upcoming week or period.
So checking in with yourself regularly.
Exactly. It could be a weekly review, maybe every Friday afternoon. You look at your scoreboard, see how many deep work hours you logged, assess your progress on the wildly important goal, and plan your deep work sessions for the next week. This regular accountability loop keeps you focused and adjusts your strategy as needed. It ensures the first 3 disciplines actually stick.
Okay, the 40X framework seems like a really solid system for making deep work happen consistently. All right, rule #2 sounds maybe less appealing. Embrace boredom. That feels counterintuitive in our simulation-addicted world. Why is embracing boredom important for deep work?
It sounds counterintuitive, but it's absolutely crucial because the ability to concentrate deeply isn't just something you switch on when needed. It's a skill. And like any skill, it needs to be trained.
You have to build your focus muscle, basically.
Precisely. Think about it like physical fitness. You can't expect to run a marathon if you spend all day on the couch and only try to run once a month. Concentration works the same way. There's a great example of Adam Marlin, described as an Orthodox Jew with Ivy League degrees who took up rigorous Talmud study later in life. This involves hours of intense, focused textual analysis daily. He wasn't doing it for business reasons, but he noticed an unexpected side effect. Highly creative insights started popping up in his business life. He attributed it to the consistent strain of the Talmud study building his general mental muscle for concentration.
So training focus in one area transferred to another.
That's the idea. Conversely, if you constantly avoid boredom, if you fill every spare moment with distraction, you're effectively training your brain for distraction. Clifford Nass, a communications professor at Stanford, did fascinating research on chronic multitaskers. He found that people who multitask all the time can't filter out irrelevancy. They can't manage a working memory. They're chronically distracted. They often think they're good at focusing when they need to, but his research showed the opposite. They can't keep on task. Their brains get rewired.
Yikes. So if I grab my phone every time I'm waiting in line or during a commercial break, I'm actually damaging my ability to do deep work later.
That's the argument. You're teaching your mind that it can't tolerate even brief moments of boredom. You're weakening its ability to sustain focus. To achieve deep concentration, you need to wean your mind from a dependence on distraction. And that means sometimes just being bored.
Okay, so how do we do that? This leads to a really interesting shift in perspective. Don't take breaks from distraction. Instead, take breaks from focus. What does that mean in practice?
It means flipping the usual script. Many people try things like an internet Sabbath or a digital detox day, taking a break from distraction occasionally. But the argument here is that's insufficient. It's like trying to lose weight by eating healthy only 1 day a week. It doesn't fundamentally change your habits or your brain's wiring.
So what's the alternative?
The strategy proposed is schedule in advance when you'll use the internet and then avoid it altogether outside these times.
Whoa! So schedule your internet time and the default is offline.
Exactly. Maybe you decide you'll check email and browse news sites for 30 minutes at noon and 30 minutes at 5 p.m. Outside those pre-scheduled blocks, the internet is off limits. No quick checks, no just looking one thing up. Keep a notepad next to your computer. If you have the urge to go online outside your block, write down what you wanted to do and the time of your next scheduled block.
Why does this work better than just occasional detoxes?
Because the core issue isn't using distracting tools, it's the constant switching between focus and distraction that weakens the mental muscles. By strictly segregating internet use into scheduled blocks, you force your brain to handle periods without that stimulus. Every time you resist the urge to check your phone or open a browser tab during an offline block, it's like doing a rep for your concentration muscle. 30 minutes of resistance become a session of concentration calisthenics.
Does this work, even if my job requires a lot of online communication?
Yes, the principle still holds. If you need to check email frequently, find schedule more frequent, maybe shorter, internet blocks, example 5 minutes every hour. The key isn't the amount of online time, but the integrity of your offline blocks. When you're offline, you are completely offline. And crucially, you must resist the temptation for that just one quick check during an offline block. Giving in makes the barrier between internet and offline blocks permeable, diminishing the training benefits.
And this applies outside of work hours too, right? Like waiting for a friend.
Absolutely. Avoid using your phone as a crutch to escape boredom in those moments. To simply wait and be bored has become a novel experience in modern life, but from the perspective of concentration training, it's incredibly valuable. Let your mind wander or just observe the world around you.
Okay, training the focus muscle by scheduling distraction. What else? There's this idea, work like Teddy Roosevelt. How did he work?
This refers to Theodore Roosevelt when he was a student in Harvard. He had an incredibly wide range of interests outside of academics, boxing, wrestling, dance, naturalism. He even published a book on naval history. Because of all these activities, he had severely restricted time for studying, maybe no more than a quarter of the typical day compared to his peers. Yet he consistently earned honor grades.
How did he manage that? The Roosevelt paradox.
The explanation is intensity. He treated the limited fragments of time he did have for studying, maybe between classes, after lunch, before training, as sacred. During those blocks, he worked with blistering intensity. No distractions, just pure, focused effort. As the source puts it, his concentration was so intense and his reading so rapid that he could afford more time off.
So the takeaway for us is, when it's time for deep work, work like you mean it.
Exactly. If you've scheduled a 90-minute deep work block, treat it as a sprint. When it's time to work, you work with intensity. Don't allow yourself mental breaks or attention shifts, like quickly checking your phone or browsing a website within that block. Commit fully. This high-intensity approach will not only improve your focus, but likely free up more time later because you get more done.
All right, embracing intensity. The next technique sounds interesting. Meditate productively. This isn't standard mindfulness meditation.
You know, it's different. It's about using periods where your body is occupied but your mind is free, like walking, commuting, showering, doing chores for structured deep thinking on a specific professional problem.
So turning downtime into focused thinking time.
Yes. Cal Newport describes developing this technique during his walk commute to MIT as a postdoc. He'd use that time to work through book outlines, structure arguments, or solve tricky technical problems in his head. The strategy for you is to identify these periods in your own life and dedicate them maybe 2-3 times a week to structured deep thinking.
How do you structure it? Is it just letting your mind wander on a topic?
Not quite just wandering. That can lead to looping or getting distracted. 2 key suggestions. First, be wary of distractions and looping. Your mind will try to pull you off task, offering unrelated but seemingly more interesting thoughts, maybe mentally composing an email or replaying a conversation. You have to gently but firmly redirect your attention back to the problem you're trying to solve. You also need to avoid just reviewing the same points over and over, looping. Second, structure your deep thinking. Don't just vaguely think about the project. Give your brain a clear task. A suggested structure is, start by reviewing the relevant variables or known information about the problem. Clearly define the specific next step question you're trying to answer. For example, what's the best opening for this chapter, or what are the assumptions in this proof? Focus your thinking on resolving that specific question. Once you have an answer or a clear path, mentally consolidate your gains, clearly review the answer or solution you've reached, then repeat the cycle with the next question.
Ah, so it's like directing your thoughts, giving them a framework.
Exactly. It turns that idle time into an intense workout routine for your concentration ability, training your mind to stay focused on a hard problem without external aids.
Okay, last one under embrace boredom. And this one sounds really out there. Memorize a deck of cards. Seriously, how does that help with deep work?
It sounds bizarre, I know, but the logic connects back to training your attention. Memory training, especially complex feats like memorizing a shuffled deck of cards, requires intense, sustained focus. Daniel Keeloff, an Australian memory champion who was diagnosed with ADHD and struggled academically, found that the memory training techniques he learned incidentally gave him the deep work edge. He developed a powerful ability to concentrate.
So it's not about the cards themselves, but the mental effort involved.
Precisely. The core idea is that this kind of training improves your general ability to concentrate. Any structured thought process that requires unwavering attention can have a similar effect. Memorizing cards is just one concrete example, and it's not about rote memorization. Memory champions use techniques that leverage the brain's strength in remembering visual scenes and locations, often called the method of loci, or memory palace.
How does that work?
Ron White, a USA memory champion, explains a common approach. First, you create a mental walkthrough of a familiar place, like your house. Visualize, say, 5 rooms. Within each room, identify 10 large, memorable items or locations in a specific order, plus 2 extra somewhere for 52 total locations. Then you assign a memorable image, often a person or vivid object, to each card in the deck, e.g. OAG King of Diamonds, Donald Trump. As you go through the shuffled deck, you mentally walk through your house, placing each card's image interacting vividly with one of your predefined locations. To recall the deck, you just mentally walk through your house again and see what images are where.
Okay, that definitely sounds like it requires focus.
Intense focus. It requires that you focus your attention again and again on a clear target. Practicing this, even for 15-20 minutes a day, will strengthen your general ability to concentrate, allowing you to go deeper with more ease.
And if memorizing cards isn't your thing?
Choose another cognitively demanding structured task that requires sustained attention. Maybe learning chess openings, studying complex texts like the Talmud, learning a musical instrument by ear. The specific activity matters less than the focused mental effort it demands.
All right, rule #3. This is probably the one that hits closest to home for many people listening. Quit social media. Whoa! That's a big statement. Why is this presented as a rule for deep work?
It's a bold rule, definitely. And it directly addresses the biggest source of distraction and attention fragmentation we discussed earlier. The source uses the story of Baritone Thurston, a writer and comedian who is incredibly connected online, tens of thousands of emails, thousands of Facebook posts. He reached a point where he felt burnt out, fried, done, toast. He did a 25-day digital detox, disconnected completely.
And did it happen?
He said it brought immense clarity and peace. But the moment the detox ended, he quickly slid back into his old hyper-connected habits. The pull was too strong.
So temporary detoxes aren't enough.
Often not, because the underlying problem remains. These network tools are designed to fragment our time and reduce our ability to concentrate. And our willpower to resist them constantly is limited. It gets depleted. The default mindset most people use to justify keeping these tools in their lives is what Cal Newport calls the any benefit mindset.
Any benefit mindset.
Yeah, it means you justify using a tool if you can identify any possible benefit it provides, no matter how small or tangential. Maybe it helps me reconnect with a high school friend. It's entertaining sometimes. It keeps me in the loop on minor industry news. These benefits are often real, but they tend to be minor and somewhat random.
And the danger is?
The danger is that these minor benefits come at a huge cost. These services are often engineered to be addictive, robbing time and attention from activities that more directly support your professional and personal goals. They offer shallow rewards that distract from deeper pursuits. Ultimately, this constant drain on your attention cripples your ability to succeed in the realm of deep work.
Okay, so the any benefit approach is flawed. What's the alternative mindset?
The alternative proposed is the craftsman approach to tool selection. Treat your digital tools with the same critical eye that a skilled craftsperson, like a master carpenter or farmer, treats their physical tools. Be skeptical.
How did that work in practice?
There's a great example of Forrest Pritchard, a sustainable farmer. He carefully considered whether to buy a new hay baler. He didn't just look at the price. the direct cost. He also weighed the opportunity costs, time spent making hay. Was time not spent raising chickens or improving soil elsewhere? And he considered the secondary value buying hay from neighbors might actually improve his soil fertility through their manure. His decision wasn't based on could a hay baler be useful sometimes, any benefit. It was based on whether it significantly advanced his core goal, his baseline, which was soil fertility.
So the principle for us, for our digital tools, should be.
The principle for you is identify the core factors that determine success and happiness in your professional and personal life. Adopt a tool only if its positive impacts on these factors substantially outweigh its negative impact.
Okay, that's a much higher bar than any benefit. It forces you to weigh the net impact on what truly matters.
Exactly. It rejects the any benefit justification and demands a significant positive contribution to your most important goals.
This connects to the next point. Apply the law of the vital few to your internet habits. This sounds like the 80-20 rule.
It is, essentially, the Pareto principle. Roughly 80% of effects come from 20% of causes. Applied here, it means that the vast majority of the value you get from your online activities likely comes from a small minority of those activities or tools. Think about those successful authors we mentioned, Malcolm Gladwell, Michael Lewis, George Packer. They achieve massive success without using tools like Twitter. Why? Because Twitter likely doesn't fall into the critical 20% of activities that drive their core goal, writing high-quality books. They are implicitly using the craftsman approach.
So how do I apply this 80-20 thinking to my own social media or internet use?
There's a specific strategy outlined. Step 1. Identify your main high-level goals, both professional and personal. Keep the list short and high-level. For example, be an effective researcher, be a present parent, maintain strong friendships, run a successful side business. Step 2. For each goal, list the 2 or 3 most important activities that help you achieve it. These should be specific enough to picture but general enough to be ongoing. For example, for the researcher goal, read academic papers deeply, conduct focused experiments, write clearly and carefully. These are your vital few activities. Step 3. Now look at every major network tool you currently use: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, news aggregators, etc. For each tool, ask yourself honestly, does using this tool have a substantially positive, a substantially negative, or little impact on my ability to perform those key vital activities regularly and successfully?
Okay, so I'm linking the tool directly back to the core activities that drive my main goals.
Precisely. And step 4 is the decision. Keep using this tool only if you concluded that it has substantial positive impacts on those key activities and that these outweigh the negative impacts.
So if a tool mostly offers minor benefits or distracts from those core 20% activities that drive 80% of my success,
Then the law of the vital few suggests you're likely better off quitting it, because all activities consume your same limited store of time and attention. Even seemingly harmless tools drain resources that could be applied to more valuable pursuits. You need to ruthlessly prune the tools that don't significantly serve your most important goals.
okay, that's a clear framework. But quitting cold turkey sounds daunting. Is there a way to test the waters? This leads to the social media ban, the 30-day experiment.
Yes, this is a practical way to apply the craftsman approach and the 80-20 rule without making a permanent decision up front. It's inspired by Ryan Nicodemus, one of the minimalists, and his packing party idea for decluttering physical possessions.
How does the social media ban work?
The strategy for you is simple. For 30 days, ban yourself from using optional network tools, especially social media platforms, maybe news sites, whatever feels like a time sink.
Yeah.
Crucially, don't deactivate your accounts. And don't announce your departure online. Just quietly stop using them for 30 days.
Okay, just stop. For a month, then what?
After the 30 days are up, ask yourself 2 specific questions about each service you stopped using. Question 1. Would the last 30 days have been notably better if I had been able to use this service? Be honest about notable improvement, not just minor convenience. Question 2. Did people care that I wasn't using this service? Did anyone important even notice or miss your presence?
And based on the answers.
The decision rule is, if your answer is no to both questions, quit the service permanently. If the answer is clearly yes to either, you can return. If it's ambiguous, the advice is to lean toward quitting.
Why does this work so well?
It replaces the vague feel that you might miss out, FOMO, with a dose of reality. Most people discover, after 30 days away, that these services were not really all that important to their core goals or happiness. They also often find that, frankly, very few people notice their absence challenging the delusion that the world is eagerly awaiting their next update. The average Twitter user, for instance, has a relatively small number of active followers. It highlights how social media can short-circuit the real reward loop, the connection between producing real value and the positive reward of having people pay attention to you. Instead, it offers a shallow collectivist alternative. I'll pay attention to what you say if you pay attention to what I say, regardless of its value. The 30-day ban helps you see if the tool provides real value or just this shallow engagement.
Okay, that 30-day experiment sounds like a powerful way to gain clarity. The next point broadens the scope beyond just social media. Don't use the internet to entertain yourself. This feels related but distinct.
It is related, targeting another major drain on potential deep work capacity: mindless browsing during leisure time. There's a nod here to Arnold Bennett, who wrote a book way back in 1910 called How to Live on 24 Hours a Day. He observed that the typical man sees his work hours as the day and his leisure time evenings, weekends as just a prologue and epilogue to be filled passively. Bennett argued passionately for seeing those 16 or so free hours as a day within a day, a precious resource for rigorous self-improvement and engaging activities.
The problem today is that the internet offers endless, easy, passive entertainment to fill that time.
Exactly. Infotainment sites, things like BuzzFeed, Reddit, endless news feeds, celebrity gossip sites are readily available and highly engaging. They are especially harmful after the workday is over, argues Newport. Why harmful? Because constantly turning to these sites provides a cognitive crutch that eliminates even the possibility of boredom or focused leisure. This constant stimulation, even outside work hours, weakens your mind's general ability to resist distraction when you do need to focus. They're always available, offering an easy escape from any moment of quiet or potential effort.
So what's the strategy here? Never relax online.
Not necessarily never, but be much more intentional. The strategy for you is strictly limit your use of the internet for entertainment. Treat it like you treat potentially unhealthy food. Don't ban it entirely, perhaps, but consume it deliberately and in moderation. One approach is to schedule specific blocks for online entertainment, just like you might schedule deep work. Maybe you allow yourself 30 minutes after dinner to browse your favorite sites. Outside those planned blocks, avoid it entirely. Find other ways to fill your leisure time. Read a book, learn a skill, exercise, have a real conversation, engage in a hobby, or even just sit and think.
Why is this structured approach better?
Again, it prevents the constant attention switching that weakens focus. And crucially, structured, quality relaxation actually recharges the energy needed for deep work the next day. Passively scrolling often leaves you feeling drained, not refreshed. Research by Mark Berman, for instance, shows that walking in nature restores directed attention faculties, while walking in a busy urban environment depletes them further. Choose leisure activities that genuinely restore your focus rather than fragmenting it further. And remember, the idea isn't to work constantly. Deliberate practice research shows even experts can typically only sustain about 4 hours of truly deep work per day. The goal isn't to replace leisure with more work, but to replace low-quality, attention-fragmenting leisure with high-quality, restorative leisure that supports your ability to work deeply when it matters. As Arnold Bennett said, the mind wants change, not just mindless rest. All they want is change, not rest, except in sleep.
Okay, our final rule. Rule #4. Drain the shallows. This sounds like actively fighting back against all that shallow work we defined earlier. How do we do that?
Exactly. If rule #1 is about maximizing deep work, rule #4 is about minimizing shallow work. They are two sides of the same coin. You need to actively identify and reduce the shallow tasks that clutter your schedule and fragment your attention. There's a great example from the software company 37 Signals, which later became Basecamp. They experimented with shortening their official work week from 5 days down to 4, May through October.
4-day work week. Did productivity drop?
Apparently not. Co-founder Jason Fried said, "The point of the 4-day work week is about doing less work, but they found employees accomplished roughly the same amount. How? Because fewer official working hours help squeeze the fat out of the typical work week. With less time available, people become stingy with their time. They naturally cut out the less important, shallow tasks and focused on what mattered. They even ran a more radical experiment one year, giving employees the entire month of June off from regular duties, no meetings, memos, status reports, just to work deeply on their own independent projects. This resulted in 2 valuable new products for the company." Fried's conclusion wasn't, how can we afford this, but how can we afford not to?
Wow, that really highlights how much time might be wasted on shallows.
It does. The core insight for you is the shallow work that increasingly dominates the time and attention of knowledge workers is less vital than it often seems in the moment. You need to become ruthless in identifying and culling this shallowness from your workday. Now, caveats apply. You probably can't eliminate shallow work entirely. Responding to important emails, attending crucial meetings, handling administrative tasks, some are necessary. And remember, deep work capacity is limited, maybe around 4 hours a day for experts. You need some time for less demanding tasks. However, the typical knowledge worker's day is often more easily fragmented than many suspect. The key is to keep shallow work confined, controlled, so it doesn't constantly impede your ability to perform deep efforts.
Okay, so how do we actively drain these shallows? The first tactic sounds intense. Schedule every minute of your day. Every minute. Really?
It sounds rigid, but the goal isn't perfect adherence, it's intentionality. We often spend large chunks of our day on autopilot, drifting from one task to another without conscious thought. Studies consistently show people are terrible at estimating how they actually spend their time, underestimating TV viewing, overestimating work hours.
So scheduling forces you to be conscious of your time.
Precisely. It's difficult to prevent the trivial from creeping into every corner of your schedule if you don't face your current balance between deep and shallow work, and then adopt the habit of pausing before action and asking, what makes the most sense right now? The strategy for you is, each morning, take a few minutes to plan out your workday. Divide the day into blocks of time on your calendar or a planner. Assign activities to each block, specific deep work sessions, blocks for email, time for meetings, lunch, even buffer blocks for unexpected things.
What happens when things change? Meetings get canceled, urgent tasks pop up. Do you just throw the schedule away?
No, that's key. It's not meant to be a rigid, unbreakable schedule. It's a flexible plan. The crucial difference is, when you get an unexpected request or a new idea, you don't follow your instinct and immediately switch to the new task. That creates a tension residue. Instead, you pause, assess the new item, and adjust your schedule. Maybe you shorten a later block or replace a less important task block with the new urgent one. You consciously decide where it fits rather than reacting automatically. Be generous with your time blocks. Make them longer than you think you need. Use overflow conditional blocks in your schedule for tasks that might run long. The act of scheduling itself forces you to confront how you're spending your time and make deliberate choices.
So it's about intention, not rigidity. Overcoming that distrust of structure leads to treating your time with more respect.
Exactly. It helps you allocate your finite time more effectively towards deep work and contain the shallows.
Okay, but to schedule effectively, you need to know what is deep and what is shallow. The next point is crucial. Quantify the depth of every activity. How do you measure depth?
This is often tricky. We know the formal definition of shallow work: non-cognitively demanding logistical-style tasks, easy to replicate. But applying it to real-world tasks can be ambiguous. Is writing a book proposal deep or shallow? Creating a PowerPoint presentation? Attending a planning meeting?
Yeah, those feel like they could be either, depending on the specifics.
Right. So our source offers a really illuminating practical question for you to ask about any given task. How long would it take to train a bright recent college graduate with no specialized training in my field to do this task?
Ah, okay, that's concrete. How does the answer help?
The analysis is straightforward. If it would take many months of intensive training for that bright graduate to do the task well, it's likely deep work. It leverages hard-won expertise, probably creates significant new value, and stretches your abilities. Example: writing a complex book proposal based on deep domain knowledge. If it would take only a few weeks or days to train someone, it's likely shallow work. It doesn't leverage your unique expertise, it's relatively easy to replicate, and probably doesn't create lasting value. Example: creating a standard sales PowerPoint using a template and existing data, or attending a routine planning meeting mainly to report status.
Okay, that's a really useful heuristic. Months to train in deep, weeks, days to train in shallow.
Use this thought experiment to objectively quantify the depth of your common tasks. Then consciously bias your time toward the former, prioritize the deep, and actively try to minimize, delegate, or streamline the shallow activities.
This next one sounds potentially awkward, but strategic. Ask your boss for a shallow work budget. Talk to your boss about shallow work.
It might feel uncomfortable, but think about it. How many knowledge workers have ever actually had a conversation with their manager about what percentage of their time should be spent on shallow versus deep activities? It's a rare question.
Yeah, probably almost never.
The strategy for you is to initiate this conversation. First, clearly define deep and shallow work for your boss, using examples relevant to your role. The how long to train question can help here. Then, propose or discuss a reasonable percentage of your time that should be allocated to shallow work, given your role and goals. Settle on a specific percentage. If you work for yourself, have this conversation with yourself. be honest about the budget.
Why is having this explicit budget helpful?
It achieves several things. First, it establishes implicit support from your workplace for prioritizing deep work. Second, it provides cover when you turn down an obligation or restructure a project that seems excessively shallow. You can refer back to your agreed-upon budget. Imagine being asked to join yet another low-value committee. Instead of just saying, "I'm busy," you could potentially say, "Based on our conversation, I need to keep my shallow work allocation around X%. Taking this on would push me over that budget. Can we discuss how this fits with my deep work priorities?" It forces a more strategic conversation. You could even track your time for a week and show your boss, "Here's the exact percentage of my time spent last week on shallow work." Faced with the numbers, a reasonable boss might see the waste in paying a skilled professional primarily to answer emails and attend endless meetings. For freelancers, it combats the guilt-driven tendency to accept any opportunity, helping you focus on higher value work while still budgeting time for necessary admin.
That requires some courage, but I can see how it could be powerful. Okay, next is a meta habit that sounds really impactful. Finish your work by 5:30 or whatever fixed time works. This is called fixed schedule productivity.
Yes, this is a personal habit Cal Newport champions. He states simply, "I don't work after 5:30 p.m. No evenings, no weekends, with rare exceptions." The strategy for you isn't necessarily 5:30 p.m., but to fix a firm goal of not working past a certain time each day. Then the key is to work backward to find productivity strategies that allow you to satisfy this declaration. You commit to the endpoint first, then figure out how to make it happen.
How does imposing that constraint actually help productivity? It sounds like it just limits work time.
It works in several powerful ways, primarily by forcing you to become much more efficient and ruthless with your time during the workday. First, it forces ruthless culling of shallowness. Just like the 37 Signals 4-day work week, a fixed end time makes you intensely aware that your time is finite. You simply don't have the luxury of letting shallow tasks expand to fill evenings and weekends. You're forced to ruthlessly reduce the shallow while preserving the deep. The source profiles Radhika Nagpal, a Harvard professor who achieved tenure early despite adhering to a strict 5 p.m. stop time and taking weekends off. How? She set drastic quotas on things like travel, only 5 trips a year versus the typical 12-24 for junior faculty, freeing up huge chunks of time for research without diminishing her core value. Second, it necessitates careful thinking and planning. Knowing you have a hard stop, the Damoclean cap on the workday, keeps your organizational efforts sharp. You can't afford to waste a morning on distractions or let deadlines creep up unexpectedly. You're forced to plan your days and weeks more carefully. Third, it shifts your scarcity mindset. When your workday feels infinite, it's easy to say yes to every request. When your time is clearly bounded, your default answer to new shallow obligations naturally shifts towards no, or at least, how can we do this more efficiently? You organize your efforts with ruthless efficiency. It also challenges assumptions. You might discover, for instance, that ignoring non-urgent emails that arrive after 5:30 p.m. doesn't actually cause problems, because often the sender didn't expect an immediate reply anyway.
So it's a constraint that breeds efficiency and focus. Powerful, simple to adopt, potentially broad impact.
Exactly. It benefits most knowledge work fields.
Okay, finally under Rule 4, we have a few specific tips, mostly focused on email, which is a huge source of shallowness. Tip #1, implement sender filters. What does this mean?
It means shifting the burden of communication slightly onto the sender, especially if you receive a high volume of unsolicited messages. Email technology is great, but the social conventions around it, one inbox for everything, expectation of a prompt reply, are often inefficient. The strategy for you is to create rules or systems that put the onus on the person asking for help to demonstrate their request is worth your limited time and attention.
Can you give examples?
Cal Newport mentions his own website contact form. Senders have to categorize their message and then explicitly check a box confirming the request is relevant and worth your time. This pre-filters significantly. Clay Herbert, a crowdfunding consultant, uses an FAQ first, then a survey to screen potential clients, and even charges a small fee for initial communication to filter out non-serious inquiries. Antonio Centeno, who runs a style blog, directs common questions to a public forum and uses checkboxes where senders affirm things like, "I am not asking Antonio a style question I could find searching Google for 10 minutes, and I will do a good deed for some random stranger if Antonio responds."
Huh. I like that last one. So it's about setting up barriers to low-value communication.
If you have the ability to dictate your accessibility, not everyone does, these kinds of filters can reclaim significant time and attention currently lost to processing low-value incoming messages.
Okay, tip #2 for draining email shallows. Do more work when you send or reply to emails. What does that mean? Aren't we trying to spend less time on email?
It sounds paradoxical, but it's about making each email interaction more conclusive, thereby reducing the total number of emails exchanged. Think about standard, short, interrogative emails. Do you want to grab coffee sometime? Remind me where we are on Project X. Can you send me that file? The instinct is a quick, shallow reply. Sure, we'll update soon. Sent. This quick reply feels efficient, but it often just bounces the responsibility back and forth, leading to a long chain of emails to resolve one simple thing. This continually sapping your time and attention.
Like that endless back and forth trying to schedule a meeting.
Exactly. The strategy for you is, before sending or replying, pause and answer this prompt. What is the project this message implies? And what is the most efficient process for bringing this project to a successful completion? Then, craft your email to move the project forward as much as possible in that single message. Don't just say yes to coffee, propose specific dates, times, a location, and maybe even suggest topics. Yes, how about Tuesday at 2 p.m. or Wednesday at 10 a.m. at the cafe downstairs? I'd love to discuss Y and Z. Ask clarifying questions that allow you to outline the full process in your reply.
So invest a bit more effort up front in each email to prevent multiple follow-ups.
Precisely. It works because it drastically reduces the number of emails needed to resolve an issue. Scheduling a coffee meeting can easily spiral into half a dozen or more messages. This saves time overall, and it closes the loop immediately, freeing up mental resources currently occupied by tracking multiple open email threads. It might feel unnatural at first, but those extra 2-3 minutes up front can save many more minutes later.
Okay, makes sense. And the final, maybe most radical tip. Don't respond strategically. Just ignore emails.
Not all emails, obviously, but yes, strategically choosing not to respond to certain types of messages is presented as a valid tactic used by many highly productive people, particularly academics observed at places like MIT. They noticed many famous professors seem to have a default of not responding unless the email clearly warranted it. What makes an email not warrant a response? Consider a vague email like, "Are you available to meet sometime?" This puts all the work on the recipient to figure out why, when, etc. Compare that to a good email. "Hi, Professor. I'm working on Project X with Advisor Y. It relates to your work on Z. Could I stop by in the last 15 minutes of your office hours on Thursday to briefly explain and see if it complements your project?" That's clear, specific, and minimizes effort for the recipient.
So ignore emails that are lazy or unclear.
That's part of it. The source suggests applying these professorial email sorting rules to your own inbox, outside of clearly high-stakes messages. Do not feel obligated to reply if any of the following apply. 1. It's ambiguous or otherwise makes it hard for you to generate a reasonable response. Puts too much work on you. 2. It's not a question or proposal that interests you. It's okay to decline with silence if appropriate. 3. Nothing really good would happen if you did respond, and nothing really bad would happen if you didn't. Low stakes, low value.
That requires being pretty ruthless. Won't people get upset?
You have to be ruthless, yes, with obvious exceptions for important relationships or critical communications. It will likely feel uncomfortable at first, and some people might get confused or upset. But the argument, echoing Tim Ferriss, is, develop the habit of letting small bad things happen. If you don't, you'll never find time for the life-changing big things. Often, people quickly adjust their expectations. They learn to send you better, clearer emails if they actually need a response. It's another way to filter for value. Hashtag, outro.
Wow. Okay, that was a lot of practical advice on top of the big ideas. So, wrapping this all up, what's the core takeaway from our deep dive today?
I think the main message is that deep work isn't some niche productivity hack or a skill just for historical figures and geniuses. It's emerging as a crucial, maybe even essential, ability for anyone seeking professional success and, perhaps more importantly, personal satisfaction and meaning in our increasingly distracted modern world.
Yeah, it's about reclaiming focus, not just to get more done, but to live a better life.
Exactly. As we've seen, whether you look at it through neuroscience, how focus shapes your reality or psychology, how flow states create happiness, or philosophy, finding meaning through craftsmanship, all these paths seem to converge on the idea that depth is deeply connected to human flourishing. It's really about consciously designing your professional life, and maybe even your leisure time, to allow for the kind of focused effort that produces things that truly matter. And in doing that, finding a profound sense of purpose along the way. A deep life, as the source concludes, truly is a good life.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Based on everything we've discussed, if you were to dedicate just 2 hours tomorrow, 2 solid, uninterrupted hours, to deep work on your single most important goal right now, what would that one thing be? What specific task would you choose to focus on? And just imagine, how might that one intentional choice, that 2-hour block of depth, begin to reshape not just your tomorrow, but maybe your entire week or even longer? Something to think about. We really hope this deep dive is giving you the tools, the frameworks, and maybe the inspiration to start cultivating your own superpower of the 21st century.